welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, Twitter is a very personal use of means of communication. We have people getting very up close and personal on Twitter. Now, whether this is a good or a bad thing is something that we shall be discussing in today's roundtable. Joining me for this discussion is Amit Malviya. He is the head of the BJP's Information Technology Department. We have Manish Tewari. He's been the former INB Minister for the UPA. He is now the National Spokesperson for the Congress Party. Seema Goswami, she's a columnist, she's an author, and she's also someone who's very prolific on Twitter. And of course, Dilip Cherian, image consultant. Well, Manish, we've seen people really using Twitter and tripping over it all.
Well, fundamentally, there are two paradigms. One is that a lot of people abuse the anonymity which the social media platforms provide in order to launch tirades against others. They won't do it, if let's suppose the person at the end of the tirade was identifiable. But then there is another dimension to that altogether. You see, in very restrictive totalitarian societies, anonymity becomes the only means of fighting a very oppressive state. So therefore, what in India is a nuisance, let's say in some other part of the world, could be a matter of existential survival. So therefore, can the social media platforms really evaluate sovereign jurisdictions or Westphalian states on the basis of an index of democracy, and then have different policies whereby you have, identifiable accounts, let's say, maybe in the United States of America, the United Kingdom, India, or some of the other democracies, and have total or virtual anonymity in some other parts of the world. So, you see, a person who would not say something to you, on your face, because he obviously won't want that all your features get aligned together, uses the anonymity which a platform provides, to say a lot of personal things. And unfortunately, that's something which now people have learned to live with. But is there a way of making these distinctions is something which new media platforms should seriously apply themselves to?
Exactly. Seema, is this a learning process still, social media for us? But at the end of the day, there is, we have a lot of complaints about trolls. We have Maneka Gandhi also saying that I will, setting up a complaint cell of sorts. So, are we mature enough to handle this?
What I found most funny about this whole Maneka Gandhi setting up a control cell is that she said she was going to control trolls, and the entire BJP social media cell jumped up and down and said, no, you can't control us, thereby admitting that they are in effect trolls. That was, I thought, the most interesting thing about it. But personally speaking, Priya, I am really not in favor of so much of policing of the social media space. As far as I am concerned, if somebody says something abusive to me or rude to me, I block and I move on. For instance, I blocked Mr. Malviya, I think, many, many years ago because he was rude and abusive, which he's not been today because he's face to face with me. So that's interesting.
But that's the thing, what he said about people shouting anonymity. I'm not talking about you personally, but even this
he
show.
Was never anonymous.
He's never. You want to come in on this before I go?
I want to make two broader points here. One is that Twitter or any social media platform reflects the society as it is. It is of people who come from various persuasions, various ideologies. They've been to different schools, they express themselves differently, and social media really reflects that point of view. That's point number one. Should we regulate it? I don't think we need to regulate it. There are enough laws in the country which allow for people to pursue a matter legally. Should there be harassment? Should there be intimidation? And those laws must be used. We don't need additional laws. We don't need to regulate these platforms because these platforms have inbuilt mechanisms to control some of these behavior.
So you don't think Maneka Gandhi is doing a good thing by setting a complaint cell?
Let me just finish. What Maneka Gandhi has tried to do is well intended, and as Seema pointed out, those who were jumping up and down were from BJP IT department or IT cell. Well, I don't think so. She probably has no idea of how the BJP's IT cell works, but it's convenient for her to blame it on the BJP's IT cell because that's her political persuasion, and she wants to blame everything on the BJP's.
But what about the trolls that attack anyone who attacks the BJP?
That's point number one. As far as Seema blocking me, the feeling is mutual. I've blocked her too.
Okay.
Because
I abused you?
Because the point is that she's
no,
intolerant.
Just 1 second.
She's intolerant. She has no scope for an alternate viewpoint. And anyone who highlights
I'm sorry,
thinks
calling
that
me a is not an alternative viewpoint.
I never called you that.
You were very abusive, Amit.
You have
which
no
is why,
idea.
Which is why you were blocked. I have never been abusive to you.
You must
have blocked me
highlight.
back.
You
but
must
let's not get it.
highlight.
It's not about you and me anyway.
No, you must highlight anything that I said to you which is remotely abusive, because I never ever abuse in my tweets in long years of association with social media. If I were abusive, I wouldn't be where I am, right? But I can't say the same for you, because
But it would be interesting to know how many people have blocked you.
Well, that's for people to figure out. And I don't think many people have blocked me. And the fact is, I blocked very few people, and you're one of them. So it speaks quite a lot about you as well.
Which speaks a lot about the medium also. Let me just bring Dilip in. Is too much freedom a good thing?
You know, I think that we've covered some very interesting ground so far. The Westphalian idea of countries, the concept of a new media, and the concept of abuse. We have to come to terms with the fact that there is a new world emerging. In this new world, actually, borders won't matter. It will be the Facebooks, the Twitter lands, and the other lands, and the Instagram lands, which will dominate the social conversation space. Unfortunately, in this space, conversation is very often replaced by a diatribe. You know, the battle of ideology, so-called. Now, unfortunately for most of us, we don't realize that there is a certain room on this new social media which people are looking for conversations and for dialogue, because the real world is getting increasingly siloized. Everybody is, you know, living in a block of their own. If you're sitting at a dinner table, most people are actually not with you at all at dinner. They're actually with somebody else on their phones.
Yeah.
Okay? So in this world of, you know, altering attention spans, it's very important that mediums like this have both kinds of checks. One is checks which you can impose very quickly and very firmly,
which is blocking.
And the other is that the medium itself must drop its own filters much quicker, because otherwise what will happen is that over a period of time, these mediums will start getting either the characteristic of abusive platforms, and there are many, you know, like for example, the Hyde Park platform for free speech has died with the advent of Twitter, and there are now very few people who go up there because you can speak your mind on Twitter.
It's a digital Hyde Park.
Yeah, so the digital Hyde Park has in a sense replaced it. Is this heading in the right direction? I think only time will tell, because I think it's too early. It's a newfound freedom, and what Manish said is that people are Amit said, I think there's an interesting point. A lot of people are coming onto this kind of a platform for the first time. So they're checking the limits. You know, it's like children. You know, you always check how far you can go with your parents. So I'm not in favor of a nanny state. I'm in favor of free speech, and I think that both sides should have levers. The platform should have a lever to pull the lever so that you can go through it, and the individual should have the lever.
These levers, were you dealing with a lot of those while you were in the INB ministry? No, social media was just developing, no?
I think, Priya, there is a need to broaden the scope of the discussion. Let's look at where we are. You see, the internet was the most audacious experiment in anarchy, and it has succeeded. The internet today represents the largest ungoverned space on planet Earth. Never before in the history of mankind has so much power resided concurrently on so many fingertips around the world. What you see is really a tale of two civilizations. A physical civilization which had evolved over the years or over the millennia, and a virtual civilization which is evolving. Now the future of humanity is actually going to lie at the intersection of these. If you look at it in terms of data, more data is churned out every 2 days than from the dawn of civilization till the 20th millennium. So you are living in a hyper-information state. The difficulty is
much
that
of that information though is
false, yeah.
And unchecked.
That's right. You're living in a hyper-information state. Now the difficulty is that in our lifetimes, we saw the rise of the internet and the new media platforms. We actually may see the demise of the internet and the new media platforms, and the biggest example of that is China. China has actually firewalled the entire internet. They have converted it into an intranet. There is no Twitter, there's no Facebook. They have their own hybrid version called the Weibo and certain others. And this Chinese state actually employs more than 3 million people to astroturf positivity on the net. So therefore, you see, you
are heading that way.
So all I'm trying to say is that if the new media platforms do not put a modicum of filters, as Dilip was pointing out, you may actually see the internet splitting into intranets, based upon social cohesion, cultural cohesion, and various other things, coming up. You already see it happening, in the sense people today talk about a Sunni net, a Shia net, an Anglo-Saxon net, a Chinese net. So therefore, there are large number of developments which are taking place, which I think India as a country needs to be very cognizant of and see that this freedom is protected, because all those people who are advocates of free speech, the first thing which is required for free speech is proper rules of engagement.
You wanted to come in?
Yeah. Look, the internet is a free medium. It allows people to organize themselves in groups that they want to. So there could be, a net driven by community. There could be internet driven by interest. There could be, communities driven by larger social causes, and so on and so forth. The internet allows people to do that. What Manish is talking about is a kind of regulation that the states puts in, like perhaps China has done and some other dictatorial.
Which I'm not saying is good.
That's right. Yeah, so I agree with Manish that it is not good, and a country like India must not have it, right? We are a democracy. We are a vibrant democracy. We must allow.
What do we do with the trolls then?
That's what I'm coming to. So the thing is that space must be allowed. Now you have to understand what people call as trolls. What is that phenomena really?
Yeah, explain.
There is a narrative building that has been happening in our country, which has largely been confined to tax-funded institutions and to the media and sections of the academic world. They have so far been regulated. They have been regulated and funded by people who've been in the power or by people who have been of certain ideology. What the internet has actually done has democratized the discourse. It has allowed people to come up with alternate views, have allowed them to come up with alternate ideological positions and perpetuate those ideas. Now, it has become a sort of battle of ideologies, a battle of differing ideas. And if I do not find what you are saying acceptable, I am quite conveniently labeling you as troll and trying to discredit what you are saying.
Okay, let me just bring in Seema as a definition of a troll. That's a good point. I want to ask everybody to define trolls.
I think when it comes to trolls, it's really not about people having a different ideological point of view. I have many people on my timeline who have completely differing ideologies from mine. And by the way, I'm not a Congress supporter, just to make that clear to you and to Manish. I am actually politically independent. I don't have anything to do with the Congress, just to make that clear to you. But there is a kind of a line that you can't cross. Just because you don't think that somebody is on your wavelength politically or ideologically, you don't start abusing them. You don't start calling their paternity into question. You don't start attacking their wives and children. You don't start saying, oh, you should be another Nirbhaya. That should happen to you. You don't do that. But the moment you do that, you have crossed the line of civilized behavior, and the law should come in and take its own course, and these people should be in jail. That's what I believe. The problem is that A, the courts are too busy and the law is too busy to take cognizance of the numerous kind of trolling attacks that happen. And the second is that platforms like Twitter do not have the ability or even the desire to control these trolls, because if they wanted to, they could block them at a minute's notice, but they don't.
For me, a troll is defined as somebody who has a gross disbalance between the number of tweets they make and the number of followers they have. That's
good point.
That's the first sign.
Point, yes.
Okay? Anyone who has 100,000 tweets and only 8 followers, guaranteed troll.
Okay.
Second, they will, or if you go through if you make the mistake of going through their tweets or their social media posts in whichever manner, you will find that it is all hysteria. I mean, it's at a pitch which is far above the discourse requires it. The third quality, entirely all of them will have flawed syntax and grammar. And I'm not talking about whichever language it is, in any language. Okay? It is not about English, or it's not about Malayalam, which is the other language which I can read fluently. There'll always be enormous flaws because they're doing it as a job. This comes to my fourth point. Many of them can be very often traced to actually making a living of it in some way, direct, indirect, recorded, unrecorded. This is for me a troll.
Manish, and how do you bring down this level, the pitch, the hysteria that you have?
You see, you need to make a distinction. One is that you have people who are individually abusive. Like, for example, as Seema was pointing out, they cross the limits of decency for the simple reason that they feel that they feel that the anonymity provides them the protection to rail against everything, including the fact as to why they were born. So therefore, you have one set of people. The other is industrial factory level trolling. These surrogate accounts. So therefore, where people have actually set up, or certain entities have actually set up call centers where this trolling activity is done on an industrial scale. So therefore, you are not actually dealing with a person. You are dealing with a surrogate account or a chap sitting at a computer terminal with, let's say, 20 Twitter accounts, with a particular mandate that you have to do this. So this is the activity.
And that seems like an attack.
This is the activity which the new media platforms can easily control. Even, let's suppose, if you go on to open source diagnostics, if there is a lot of traffic which is, let's say, emanating from a particular city, let's say Bangalore, for example, and it is coming from a particular geographical location, then it is obviously not an individual who is doing it. It is being done on an industrial scale. So therefore, that is what has really vitiated the discourse in this country. More than the individual trolls, it is this industrial scale use of the new media platforms, for purposes which I would not call kosher, is really responsible for vitiating the discourse. And this is what the new media platforms, if they want, can control very easily.
But as you are someone who's actually working in an IT's department, so how would you handle this problem?
Well, I've heard Manish talk about this industrial level of trolling quite a few times. I have actually seen no example of it so far.
Because it's mostly happening against the Congress.
No, it's not happening against the Congress. It happens against everybody.
Amit, if you want, in fact, let me tell you, there is empirical evidence which is available, and at some point in time, if Priya has a discussion on that, I will put all that empirical evidence on the table. In fact, I was prepared at one point in time to put it all on the table of Parliament, to actually let people know as to what really is the reality of the darker side of new media in our country. And I'm not talking about the dark net, the darker side of new media in our country.
I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to come back to you, Amit, because I know you want to rebut, but just a quick break before that. Welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, today we are discussing social media, the good part of it and also the dark side of it, as Manish Tewari so eloquently put it. Amit, I'm going to bring you in on this. You wanted to come in?
Yes, I'm actually looking forward to Manish to table these empirical evidence he calls, whether in the Parliament or outside or anywhere that he does. We'll be quite happy to discover what he's talking about, because I've heard it so often, I've never seen it. That's point number one. Point number two is that...
But how can you not have seen the trolls, Amit? I'm also a little curious.
I am not saying that I haven't seen trolls.
Okay.
All I'm trying to say is that let's see where these industrial trolls exist. I want to see that call center Manish keeps referring to.
I don't think he means a physical call center. He means that these are people who are given a brief.
I don't know how you know what he means,
I think
but the
that's
fact
what
is,
he
let him
means.
speak
No,
for
I
himself.
am actually talking about physical call center.
But
Exactly. So he's talking about physical call center.
In this day and age, you don't need physical call center.
Well,
No, in the sense, you see, let me come in there. There, you're right. There is a way you can organize yourselves, whereby you employ individual volunteers, maybe on a voluntary basis or a paid basis, to do that. But then, if you really want to control the activity and do it like an industry, then you have to localize it, because that provides for better control. And that's exactly what Amit has been referring to, that he would like to see empirical evidence of that. You know, and at some point in time, in some discussion, I will put that empirical evidence.
Absolutely.
Done. So we have a date for another discussion
I look forward
soon.
to that. And
Okay.
maybe you can take Seema along and show that call center so that she's satisfied.
Actually,
No, but hang on,
can I
I'm very
just-
impressed with
can
this
I-
industrial
No,
scale.
Priya,
Can I
actually,
just-
India Today has done a story on this, and they have provided evidence. Maybe you can go back and read a magazine if it's not too much
Perhaps.
trouble.
So,
I think you both, I'll call you again for a separate debate.
the thing is that we have to understand that even if, let's say, there is an organized attempt to put out a narrative, does that actually serve the purpose of the new age media? To my mind, it doesn't. Because as long as you're not saying things that convince the people that you actually want to buy into your argument, the whole purpose is defeated. And what the new age media is doing, and like I said earlier, is democratizing the medium. It's democratizing the discourse, and it's taking away the right to set discourse from a select few and, you know, making it open to everyone else. Let me just finish, please. Earlier, a whole host of journalists, right?
No,
in
you
our
made that
country-
point.
No, I have to complete this point. Thought that it was their sole prerogative to decide what should be narrative on few things.
Let us presume that there were certain editors who thought that it is their birthright to try and shape the narrative in a particular manner. There is nothing wrong in putting out an alternative narrative, but there is something very wrong in directing 5,000 social media posts at him, calling him, calling his wife, calling him his children
I
of
have-
dubious paternity. That is
I'm
trolling
sorry,
which
can
we
I-
object to.
can I
That is
comment?
what
That
it
is
is.
trolling that we
Can
object
I
to.
come in? Can I
Well,
come in?
You have not seen, we've seen.
I'm sorry,
I have
in the
to
sense
make
you have to
this
look at the timeline of
I have to
any
make
person in public life,
I
and you will see
have to make
5,000 such tweets, you know, targeting him
clearly-
and
I have to
his,
make
and his
this
family.
point.
Clearly,
I
Priya.
have to make this point.
Priya.
There might be people who are doing it, but whether they are doing it in an organized manner or not is the point that Manish is trying to put forth,
No, no,
and I
can I-
don't
can
think
I
that
come
is
in,
true.
please?
That is exactly what I've been
But they
saying
may
all
be doing
throughout.
it, but not at the behest of
Well, that's
your
exactly
leaders.
what I'm
I mean,
saying.
you don't have to.
People could do and they say things that they want to. But what Manish or Seema are alluding to, that this whole new age
No, we are not-
media is not credible enough because there is this
No, I'm
organized
not talking
syndicate
about
that is
new age
working.
media.
I disagree with that. I differ there. I said people say
But
whatever
there is
they
an
have to
organized
say.
syndicate. We don't know who's in charge
Again,
of it.
again,
yet.
Absolutely.
no, no,
Absolutely.
again, Priya, let me come in on that. You see, as we speak, there are diagnostics which are being experimented with, which will allow credible social media feeds, you know, to really be graded in the public space. For example, the guy who live tweeted the Abbottabad raid.
Yes,
Now,
that's
if he
the
would
point.
have been a credible source,
Yeah.
right, which would have been graded in some manner,
He
actually
would
the
tend to
whole
see.
world would have seen the Abbottabad raid live tweeted.
In fact, it
so,
already,
so
it
to
already
deal with this
exists.
phenomenon.
By the way, on Twitter, it already exists. You can, there is a free Twitter screen which allows you to get credibility ratings for each person, and you can actually have those ones come up on top. But I think there's a interesting point that Amit is making. You see, part of the reason to have these troll armies, existent, non-existent, localized or distributed, whatever the case may be, is because people want to live in an echo chamber of their own. So what is happening is that people are getting into echo chambers where they are listening to the sounds of their own trolls. And that is most dangerous, because then the leaders actually will, over a period of time, realize that the real world has a different opinion.
Which is
Can
very
I-
dangerous.
Can I comment
Quickly,
here?
last word.
Yeah, when he talks about, you know, how MSM
This
or
is not going to be a last word.
mainstream media has a control over the narrative, it's very interesting because people say, oh, nobody is talking about, say, Malda. And then they give a link to TOI where there's a Malda story. And on the other hand, when you look at the right wing, they are the ones who have actually an organized media cell. They are the ones who have an organization like Niti Central, which is actually what he calls an echo chamber, which just has right-wing views. No mainstream paper ever has just right-wing or left-wing views. They always have a mixture.
Can I just come in here? Malda is a very interesting example. Malda happened and Bengal burned for days, but no mainstream media covered it till this was actually raised on social media, and it was raised to the point where mainstream media just could not keep their eyes shut any longer.
So going apart from the politics, social media can
Yes.
be used as
and,
a tool.
And please, the other point is that everyone is free to organize themselves the way they want to. You may like to call it an echo chamber. Some people like it that way. It happens in the real world. It happens on the digital space also. To say that Niti Central is X, why would say another newspaper not be that? I mean, each newspaper has its biases. They are very evident. Their editors have biases. Television anchors have biases.
So if Niti Central
they don't
is
wear
fine,
it
why
on
are
their
these
sleeves,
people
but
not
it is
fine?
so apparent that you cannot
Priya, there is a fundamental contradiction in this argument. And the fundamental contradiction is that if the new media space is supposed to be a free space, if it is supposed to democratize discourse, if it is supposed to allow a million opinions to filter in, the fact that you are organizing it and then using it to drive the discourse in a particular manner actually defeats the democratization argument of the social media.
That is something we all agree on, and on that note, I am ending the show. Thank you for watching this edition of Roundtable. We'll see you again same time next week.